Today we take a look at a trio of stories that all revolve around the same subject. Is it possible that dreaming can open a gateway for the dead and the dying to visit us? And if that is true, why? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. Just woke up from my nap, so it's time to record a podcast. Jason, you nap more than any adult I've ever heard. You always talk about waking up from naps. I usually take a long nap after work, honestly. Garfield, I'm a real life Garfield. I love napping. Usually I'll nap for about an hour and a half. But someone who loves napping more than me, someone whose laziness shocks the universe, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Denby Jones. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Wait, don't wake him up, Woohoo, yeah, wee! Denby Jones, rubbing his eyes, walking into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Denby Jones is a Patreon supporter, but the reason why he's getting a shout out for this is because he shared his Spotify Wrapped on his social media. That's a great way to spread the word about the show. If you can't support the show financially, I totally understand through the Patreon or YouTube membership. I get it. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Also, this is the second to last episode of season 23. We got today's episode, tomorrow's episode, and after that, we will be on break for 2 weeks. We'll be doing our retro rabbits, maybe some Dead Rabbit Radio classics tossed in here and there. I haven't started them. I haven't started that project. Too busy napping. But definitely 2 more episodes left of the season. Denby Jones, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit dirigible. Everyone hop on board as Denby flies us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command all the way to a hospital. We're flying out to this hospital, this beautiful hospital, or maybe just a regular hospital. All hospitals seem to be big rectangles, which would make sense, because that way, I mean, what are you, it's supposed to be a pyramid, right? You're like, oh no, the delivery room's on the top of the pyramid, babies are sliding down the side. But you ever notice that hospitals are never pretty? They're just big, giant kind of rectangles. Well, we're in one of these rectangles full of doctors, and we're about to meet this young man. Let's call him Dave. Actually, he gave himself a fake name in the narrative. He calls himself Dave. That's not his real name. And he works with an elderly man who he names Ed, and that's also not the dude's real name. It's 2015. Now, they don't work in a hospital. Dave's walking through the hospital, and he's there to visit his buddy Ed. They met at work. And they became friends. That's a cool thing about a workplace sometimes. You can meet people you would have never hung out with. You kind of like gel with them. Ed is an elderly man. Totally not the age group that Dave is in. I don't know how old he is, but probably like late 20s, early 30s. And he's a little concerned for his friend. Ed has cancer. And Ed's had cancer for a while. He's actually been in and out of the hospital. And at first, Dave and his coworkers were like, oh, dude, I don't know if Ed's going to make it. Like, he doesn't seem to be doing too good. But then he would get back out of the hospital and show up at work. He's like, hey, everybody, let's go. Let's start working. Driving a forklift around. I don't know if elderly people are allowed to drive forklifts. They're barely allowed to drive cars. Ed would go in and out of the hospital. Well, on this particular day in 2015... when Ed was in the hospital, Dave goes to the hospital to visit him. Figures, oh, that'll be nice. After work, I'm going to swing by the hospital, see how good old Ed is doing. So he's walking through the hospital, and he's like, do you know where Ed is? And the nurse is like, right over there. And Dave's like, oh, cool. So he walks, and then he looks, and he walks into the room, and there's Ed in bed, sleeping. And Dave kind of stands there for a bit, and he's like, well, I really wanted to let Ed know I was thinking about him. But I don't want to wake him up. The hilarious, hey man, wake up. I was thinking about you. Creepy guy hanging out in your bedroom, and then what? He's like, okay, well, I was thinking about you, but now that you're awake, I'm going to leave. He goes, I walk in, saw that Ed was asleep. I didn't want to bug him. Didn't want to be a big creepo. So I stood around in his hospital room for a couple minutes silently, and then I just left. Early the next morning, Dave is asleep at home, and he has a dream. He's sitting in his living room when all of a sudden Ed walks into the living room. And he has this huge smile on his face. He's walking around. Dave said it looked like he was walking like a man half his age. He was walking like a spry 40-year-old. Ed walks into the living room, big smile on his face, hitting the gritty, showing off the fact that he has a healthy body. He turns, he looks at Dave, waves, and says, "Hi, Dave." Ed then walks into the wall and disappears. Dave woke up, and he didn't think anything about the dream. It's a pretty weird dream. I probably would have been like, what was that all about? How did Ed know how to do the gritty? That was a weird dream. Dave wakes up. He doesn't really think much of the dream. He gets ready. He goes to work. 9 a.m. Hey, everybody. Quit moving those presses. Working on the steel mill. Hey, get those 100-year-olds off the forklifts before OSHA comes. Guys, gather around. I got an announcement for you. The foreman says, I don't know, this guy could have worked computer software. I just imagine everyone has a hard hat on and they're wearing white tank tops. Everybody gather around. I got some tragic news for y'all. Ed, everyone's favorite 80-year-old employee, is dead. Ed is dead. Dave, well, this is what's interesting about the story. I'm going to cover 3 stories that all involve the dead, the dying, and dreams. And originally, I could have spread this across 3 episodes, but I think we're going to do a really interesting compare and contrast because, of course, I found some pretty weird examples of this. So that's what I'm all about, is finding the most obscure, weird examples. Dave said, once he found out that Ed was dead, the dream totally made sense to him. Ed was coming by to say goodbye. Ed was visiting Dave while he was dreaming for one last smile, one last wave, before he walked away. Made sense, right? A vision of a dead man in our dreams. This is pretty common in the world of the paranormal. Might be one of the most common paranormal events as far as ghosts go. A lot of people go, well, that's not really a ghost, that's you just remembering them in your dreams. But a lot of these stories, especially ones we're going to look at now, but not all the time. Sometimes people dream of somebody before they die, and the dream quite often is very unusual, to say the least. This one wasn't the creepiest dream. Obviously, it was just an old man waving to you, smiling, depending on your personal views on old people. That may or may not be creepy. But the reason why I selected this one, the reason why I think this is so interesting, is because he goes, I believe that Ed visited me in my dreams. Dave, who posted this online underneath the name Difficult Apartment 27, he goes, this wasn't the first time I've dreamt about a dead person. But it's super rare when I do, and this one felt like a visit. This one was like an other personality, another soul was in my dreams. I've dreamt of other people who had passed away before, but it felt like a dream that involved them or was about them, but they weren't actually there. The soul wasn't actually inside of my dreamscape. But this is the interesting part of this, and I think this is really what throws a big wrench into the world of the paranormal. Awesome. You've had dreams about dead people before, but they didn't feel like a visit. This visitor, Ed, actually felt like his soul himself was coming to you and saying goodbye. But then let's look at how he ends this. Dave ends this saying, quote, "I've since lost several dear family members who I would love to hear from, but have remained silent in death." That's heartbreaking. That's the twist. That's the tricky part. And the thing is, it's heartbreaking. Imagine if you knew, Dave believes that his buddy's soul transcended death to visit him one last time, which is beautiful. But then since that time, other people he's loved have not been able to do that. Have not been able to or not wanted to. It'd be worse, right? It'd be way, way worse. That's super interesting. Because he may have never even thought that, might have believed in a ghost story here or there, or read something in Time magazine about something like this, but never gave it much thought about the dead visiting us in our sleep. Like I said, it was rare when he had dreams about dead people anyways, and when he did, it just felt like a normal dream. But once he knows this is possible, once he has a work friend enter his subconscious, when his close loved ones die and they don't, you would think, wow, something's wrong. What is up with that? If you didn't think it was possible, you wouldn't miss it. But if you knew it was possible and the people you loved the most were not visiting you in the same way, not even to just say, "Hi, Dave." Super interesting. Super interesting ghost story, because why? Like I said in the opening, why is that? Why is that the work friend can show up, but those closest to us cannot or choose not to? And that is a question that Dave is going to have to struggle with for a while. And he may never get an answer, or at least not while he's alive. And that went out on a chipper note. Denby, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the Jason Jet. We're going to leave behind this hospital, fly us all the way out to... Oh, I should have figured this. I should have figured this was coming. Another hospital. This is the part where YouTube decides to nuke the show. This is where we're going to get COVID heavy. COVID. I'm not going to call it by anything else. I'm not going to change the word so I don't get demonetized. None of that nonsense. As the whole show gets yanked after this. Whatever. We're about to meet this young man. Let's call him Craig. He's in the hospital himself. He's not just a visitor. No one likes going to a hospital, but if you're going to go there, it's best to be on the visiting team. Craig is in the hospital. The year's 2020. He has COVID. He got it really bad. A really bad case of COVID. Ends up getting hospitalized because he's having a hard time breathing and he has an extremely high fever. One night, he's in the hospital and he's in and out of consciousness. What's going on? I'm out of consciousness again. Which would be the worst, right? I mean, at a certain point, just hit me over the head with a mallet. Let me sleep. That'd be the worst. I guess dying would probably be the worst, but the second worst, in and out of consciousness, you can't even watch television. What? Young Sheldon, you're all you're faking you're unconscious while that show's on. You're like, is it over yet? He's in and out of consciousness one night, and he does have a high fever, right? Let's go ahead and give the skeptics at least that. We have a guy who has a high fever, his brain's boiling, he's in and out of consciousness. But again, there's some really weird twists to this story. If you think you've heard it all, you haven't. Young Sheldon, you little scamp, Malcolm in the Middle's better, he's just kind of in and out of consciousness. When all of a sudden, a dog jumps up on Craig's bed. But not just any dog. It's Jake! It's Jake! That's a fake name. That's a fake name. I don't want to embarrass a real dog. Jake! Jake, that was Craig's old dog. Jumped up and sat on the bed, and Craig starts petting it. Oh, Jakey boy. Oh, Jakey boy. Can you grab the remote, please? Anything? TBS Young Sheldon Marathon? No. Jake is sitting on his lap, and all of a sudden, Craig's grandma and grandpa are right next to his bed as well. And they're kind of just holding his hand. You can feel their touch on his skin. Oh, Grandma. Grandpa. Oh, such beautiful old people. And Jake, my loyal dog. Jake, his loyal dog, unfortunately died in 2018. His grandmother had passed away in 2016, and his grandfather had passed away in 2012. And he saw this as them coming to comfort him while he was on the brink of death. His brain's boiling, Jason. This is a pretty normal thing. What happens when the temperature of your brain goes up? Well, we're not done just yet. But, yeah, right. You're going to hallucinate when your brain's on fire. He also said while he was in this hospital room at one point, he's just laying there, and he sees a man walk into the room. A tall, thin man wearing all black with a top hat. A little stylish top hat. It's not the shadow man, hat man type of guy. It looks like a normal dude. He's just wearing a top hat. When's the last time you saw someone in a top hat outside of a theater or ballet or something like that? Or a history book about Abraham Lincoln getting his brains scattered across the Ford Theater. You have this man walk in wearing this top hat, dressed in all black, and he walks into Craig's room. Craig looks over, he's like, wow, who's this weirdo? When all of a sudden the man goes to Craig's bedside and holds him down against the bed. And as this man is pushing Craig into the mattress of the bed, Craig can't breathe. He can feel himself lose the ability to take a breath. He can't move. He's paralyzed. He's struggling to stay alive. Again, it should be another sign of high fever, severe illness. But what really just caps this off is the story of Denise. One night while Craig is in the hospital, he has a dream. There's a girl named Denise. Denise was a girl that Craig knew from high school. And that was back in the year 2000. So 20 years before he ended up in this hospital bed, he knew this girl, Denise. He didn't know her well. He was never close to her. Wasn't a member of her inner circle. She wasn't a member of his inner circle. They didn't really interact much. But he knew her. Like you'll know people at your school, but it doesn't mean that they mean anything to you or that you mean anything to them. This dream he's having is about Denise. A girl from 20 years ago, a girl from high school that he didn't know very well. A girl that he hadn't even thought about for 20 years. A girl that just was a side character in his life. Not even a side character, like a background character. He hadn't thought of her for 20 years. But now in the year 2020, he's having a dream where she is dying of cancer. You're like, Jason, wow, you're really going heavy on all this cancer stuff tonight. Sorry, it is a paranormal podcast. Unfortunately, people have to die for these things to happen. Denise is dying of cancer in his dream. And he doesn't go into specifics about it. I don't know if he's just dreaming, he's reading the newspaper and he sees an article on it, or if he's a member of the people who are concerned about her as she's passing away. He just said that, I dreamt that she was dying of cancer. And when he woke up, he's his bigger problems, right? The man's trying to murder him. He's wondering where his dog is. But eventually Craig does start to get better. And, as he's no longer in and out of consciousness, as he's no longer on death's doorway, he's seeing the dead and the damned enter his hospital room. He goes, I started to feel a little bit better and then a little more better and so on and so forth. And then I ended up getting back on Facebook just to check up on people. Take some selfies, send some status posts saying I'm not dead. He goes, I'm on my Facebook, I'm looking around, and I see a notification that Denise, who was not one of his Facebook friends, he hadn't thought of her for 20 years, but going through the grapevine of friends and family, Denise died of cancer. And when he looks at the day that she died, that was the same day that he had that dream. So again, what we have here, it's even more bizarre than the last one. Also, let me say, Dave posted this online as GoodLord0605. In the first one, Dave had a dream that his work buddy... Well, nothing in Dave's dream made it seem like Ed died. He didn't even say goodbye, Dave. He didn't go, I'm now off to the land beyond all reality. No, he just said, hey, Dave, or hi, Dave. This one, he has a dream that a girl he hadn't thought about, and he wasn't even close to back when he did think about her, back when he saw her in high school. He has a dream she dies of cancer on the day she died of cancer. And it's not even like, I'm trying to think of what the word is for it. Precognition is telling the future. Postcognition is intimate details about the past. What's just cognition? I mean, I know that it's thought, but what's the, I guess remote viewing would be the best term I could think of. But why her? That's what's so interesting about these stories. Again, why? We understand, we've seen multiple stories, this is really, really normal stuff for near-death experiences of loved ones that have already passed away coming to help you to the other side. Because it's probably pretty likely that Craig was going to die. Fever, bad enough, right? COVID, when you are hospitalized for COVID, that's when it was really, really bad. Rest of us, most of us got COVID. If you did get it, at this point, probably everyone has, but you got COVID and you just kind of, I'm not going to undersell it, right? I was miserable. I got sick within an hour. Sabine was with me. We were out at a Mexican restaurant and she saw me over the course of a Fiesta bladder get sicker and sicker and sicker. She's like, it was the fastest I'd ever seen anyone get sick. I had just left work and I was feeling fine. And then we're eating out of this Mexican restaurant. Basically, my face is melting. And we finished the food, right? I mean, I was like, I'm just going to finish eating these delicious burritos at Ixtapa. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And then she's like, dude, you're sick. You are sicker now than you were 30 minutes ago. Eventually, this was the first time that it happened. She brings me home to my place, and I walk in, and I take the COVID test, and it pops positive. And she's like, okay, see you later, bro, I'm out. Like, she did end up taking me, or picking me up groceries and dropping them off and stuff like that, but she didn't want to get it, spoiler alert. She got it 2 days later. It was a little hard not to get it when someone's sitting across from you from an hour of talking and eating at the same time. When you were hospitalized for COVID, when you're having breathing difficulties, right? That's when you really were on death's door. It's very possible that Craig could have died. And these were his friends and family from beyond coming to make that journey easier. It's also possible they were just coming to comfort him. It's also possible his brain was on fire. It's also possible that the man in the top hat, that sounds like sleep paralysis to me. That totally sounds like sleep paralysis. It's a real phenomenon. It happens. It has a like, you can measure it. It's a scientific thing. Your body thinks it's still dreaming when you're awake. You can't move your body, and you start having a nightmare. Sleep paralysis, that's normal even if you aren't on death's door. Grandpa and Grandma and his little puppy Jake showing up. Could be his brain boiling. But knowing something you shouldn't know, knowing a fact that you should not know, a fact that is actually happening while you're asleep, of somebody you had zero connection to, and you had never even had a passing thought about them for 20 years, having knowledge of an event like that while you're sleeping, this is where we get into the world of the paranormal. You could say it was a coincidence, but this is really where I think she was in his dreams. He gained that information. And it wasn't until later. It wasn't like the next day he woke up, he's like, I got to find out what happened. He checked Facebook. No, he found out later when he was feeling better. He's on his Facebook. However many days later that was. Finds out that she had died. I think this story is interesting because I think there's a lot of... this is going to be depressing. I think there's a lot... like any of it's ever uplifting. The episode where the dead visit you while you sleep. I think there's something to be said about the people who you are important to. This is going to be real depressing. So I've got to be careful how I say this. The people who you are important to and the people who are important to you. Meaning Denise may have seen Craig as her long-lost love. These two people walking around high school, living their lives, Denise was just somebody who was there to Craig, but to Denise, Craig may have been everything. She could have been, she doesn't have to be a creepy stalker, like she's stealing his underwear and shimmying down the side of the house so she can get a peek of him sleeping. She doesn't have to be a super stalker. But she could have really liked Craig, but never told anybody. Definitely never told Craig. She could have been passionately in love with him behind the scenes. She could have just had a crush on him. She could have just really, really liked him. And she thought about him over the next 20 years. Never crossed his mind, but I'm not saying again she was cutting out pictures of his face that she took of while he was sleeping. She shows up wearing a top hat. She's like, she's all suffocating him in bed. She's disguised as Jake, a puppy, jumping upon him. I'm not saying that she's the crazy stalker lady, but she could have thought about him for 20 years. Not all the time. I have to be very clear. I don't know why. You guys understand what I'm saying, but you know what I mean? Like, every so often she goes, I wonder whatever happened to Craig. I wonder what happened to that cutie. She turns around, she walks into her dark room, and she has all these photos of him. She's like, oh yeah, now I remember. This is what he ate yesterday for lunch. She's broken into his house to steal a little bit of stool samples. She's like, I'll test him. She's like, he needs more fiber. It's possible. I don't know why. I'm trying not to turn her into a freak, and then I keep making it worse and worse. But you know what I mean. There are people in my orbit that obviously I care very much for. And then I have acquaintances, and it kind of spreads out from there. And then there have been girls in my life. It's rare, because usually I will say something. Usually I will be like, I'll try to seal the deal. But there are girls in my life that probably don't know how much they meant to me in that time period. Probably a few, right? A handful. I don't know. I couldn't even guess. Over the course of my entire life, 5 maybe. Usually I will kind of try to seal the deal. I was like, so are we doing this? Is this something viable? But there may be some girl in my past who had like a huge crush on me and not only never said anything, I never even considered it because she was someone I very rarely interacted with. Super rarely interacted with. Let's go back to high school, right? There could have been this girl that was in my theater class. I can't even think of an example because that's what I'm saying. Like, it would be someone so far outside of your normal orbit who has a huge crush on you. Like, a huge crush on you. Like stealing your fingernail clippings, or barring that, taking their own fingernail clippings, clipping your nails while you're asleep. And when that girl dies, will I dream about her? Will I have a dream about her? So she is nothing to me, but I'm something to her. That's kind of what I'm getting at. This might have been the case with Denise and Craig, and that's why it was so unusual for him. In her last moments, she wanted Craig to know about her. She wanted Craig to remember her. She wanted Craig to mourn her. She wished that 20 years ago she had made a declaration of love to him, and every year after that kept wishing the same thing. And he's sitting there eating his Cheerios each morning, not even really thinking about it. And then when she dies, she lets off such a huge psychic blast. That's when he feels it. I don't know, right? That was just none of that is in the narrative. You're like, oh, I want to double check those notes. Sounds fascinating. None of that. He didn't say any of that. He didn't post any of that. I'm hypothesizing. Because the question is why? Why did he dream about Denise the night she died when he never even thought about her for 20 years? Not only did he have a dream about her dying of cancer, which that alone is specific enough, but on the very night she died. On that date. Why? Interesting. I don't think that is because his brain was melting. That really isn't something. A fever doesn't give you the ability to know information miles away. If it did, I'd be giving myself fevers all the time. Denby Jones lets Tashi the keys to the world-famous Carpenter copter. We are leaving behind this hospital. Denby Jones, fly us all the way out to Grandma's house. We're about to meet a grandma. A lot of old people in this episode. Again, people on the verge of death. We're about to meet this grandma. Let's call her Phyllis. That's a very grandma name. Phyllis is a grandma, and she has a 5-year-old granddaughter. So she's kind of new to the grandma game. She's still getting her gums wet. Well, she gets COVID, right? She gets COVID. She's old. She gets COVID. She has COVID now. Not right now, but when the story's taking place, we don't have an exact year, but we can assume it took place between the year 2020 and now. If it involves COVID, definitely not before that. Maybe November of 2019. Phyllis gets COVID and she gets bad. She gets COVID. She's pretty sick. She's been sick for 28 days, but she's doing everything at home. She doesn't want to go to the hospital for it. 20 days is a long time to be sick, by the way. I mean, like, I get it. You're like, I don't know, hospital bills are kind of expensive. You probably should, after day 20, you might go, oh, they're expensive, but they're there for a reason. She ends up, towards the end of these 28 days, she's so sick she's not even eating anymore. I think Grandpa was looking for a new grandma, if you catch my drift. He should have taken her to the hospital. She's literally wasting away. She begins to have these dreams. Didn't see that plot twist coming. She begins to have these dreams that her grandmother, who we will call Mabel, is comforting her. Now, Mabel passed away a long time ago. Her grandmother had passed away a long time ago. But here we have Phyllis. She would have these dreams that she was laying on Grandma's chest. I'm assuming just like her head on her chest. I mean, unless her grandma was Andre the Giant, I don't think you can lay completely on her chest. She's laying like her head. Apparently, you're like, Jason, of course that's what she means. You idiot. Of course that's what she means. I don't know. They just said laying on her chest. But anyway, so Phyllis is laying her head on Grandma Mabel's chest. And she felt like she was just being taken care of. She felt completely comfortable. peaceful in this moment. She goes, I used to do this when I was a kid. After my grandma got out of the wrestling ring, after she defeated Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania, I would crawl on her chest and put all my body weight on Grandma Mabel's chest. That's what killed her, by the way. I put my head on her chest. I did this as a kid. It's a comforting thing. Well, now I'm having these dreams about it, and Grandma Mabel's died a long time ago. My brain is being cooked from the inside out. That is a symptom of COVID. But these are comforting dreams. Well, one night, I'm laying my head on Grandma's chest, and Grandma Mabel says, come. Which is not something you normally want, Grandma. Not normally something. I mean, context is everything, right? Context is everything, but Grandma Mabel is sitting there. Phyllis is laying her head on Grandma's chest, and Grandma says, come. So anyways, Phyllis is not a 6th grader. Phyllis doesn't immediately begin giggling at that. She understands what the intention is. Grandma wants to take me to the other side. It's my time to go. Like, I am at death's door. Like, I've already turned the knob. I'm taking a step inside. I've had COVID for 28 days. It's been a few days since I've eaten something. Yeah, this is pretty bad. But when Grandma tells her to come, Phyllis doesn't want to. Phyllis remembers that she has a 5-year-old granddaughter, and she can't wait to spend all of those Thanksgiving and Christmases and birthdays and park visits and first day of school and all that stuff with this little girl. She doesn't want to go. And Phyllis raises her head up and says, please, please don't take me now. At that point, the dream shifts. And Phyllis is sitting in her house. Phyllis is sitting in her house, and she hears the sound of a man breaking in. Terrifying sound to hear, right? Glass shattering. If you're the one shattering the glass, that means mission successful. The home invasion has begun. But if you're not the home invader, if you're just sitting there, and all of a sudden, you hear glass shatter. Uh-oh. And indeed, Phyllis is sitting in her living room in this dream. She's sitting in her living room. She hears a man break in, and the man runs up to her and begins stabbing her in the back. Multiple times. And she's getting stabbed. And the pain in the dream wakes her up. Phyllis sits up and she said, the attack in the dream was so vicious, I still felt the pain after I woke up. I had this stabbing pain in my back. And she finally convinced her husband, who's already looking for a new wife. He's like, oh, Tinder. This is what the kids are using these days. She finally convinced her husband to take her to the hospital. She's like, you need to take me to the hospital. I'm in tremendous pain right now. And Phyllis is thinking the pain's from the dream. But it's weird that it's continuing into wakefulness. Is that a word? When she's awake. When she's in this terrible pain, husband puts her in the car, they drive to the hospital. She's taken into the ER, she's diagnosed with pneumonia, which makes sense, right, with COVID. She was also diagnosed with a saddle pulmonary embolism, which is a massive blood clot that blocks both lungs. She's brought in. They begin pumping her full of blood thinners. Phyllis said her doctor was surprised she survived. Doctor was like, when you came in here, it was already pretty dicey. Had you not come in, you would have been dead within a few hours at home. But even when you did come in, it was really touch and go there for a while because this pulmonary embolism was basically going to stop the blood flow to your lungs. You were going to die. And the pneumonia, right? He's like, yeah, and the fluid in your lungs wasn't helping anything at all. An interesting conclusion to this story was posted online by someone going by the name L. Dodd68, which I will assume is the year she was born. A young grandma. She said that since she had that incident where she had she had multiple dreams about her grandmother Mabel. Then the grandmother Mabel asks her to come. She says no. The dream shifts to the man breaking into the house. Since that night, Phyllis has never had another dream about her grandmother. Now, there's an interesting fact that we don't know. Did she have a lot of dreams about Grandma Mabel? Not like every single night. She's like, oh no, I gotta go to sleep. Oh, Grandma Mabel's gonna make me watch Addams Family on television. We don't know how often she dreamt about Grandma Mabel before COVID. We know she dreamt a lot about her during COVID. But imagine if she dreamt about Grandma Mabel even like once a year or 2 or 3 times a year before this, and to never have another dream about her afterwards. Here's my take on this. There's a couple different ways you can look at it. But one, to me, it almost seems like Grandma Mabel showed up to try to comfort Phyllis and get her to go to the other side. Get her to die peacefully. And when Phyllis said no, the process was, quote unquote, speeded up, i.e., some sort of entity or some sort of force was trying to kill Phyllis in that moment. The man that's such a dream of someone breaking into your house. Your house is an extension of you. And it's not, you're looking around, there's a bunch of top ramen bags on the ground, there's a 2-liter of Mountain Dew rolling around by the garbage can. It can be messy. I'm not saying you're like, oh no, I'm full of cockroaches. Ah! You're screaming, cockroaches are coming out of your mouth. I'm not saying that it's a reflection of you. Some people believe that, but that's why if you guys have ever had a house broken into, I don't know if I've ever had a house broken into. I don't know. Thinking off the top of my head. But it's a violation. I know I thought I had my house broken into. I just didn't shut the door. I didn't lock the door that day. Or no, I turned the deadbolt and then I left and it was just barely, the door was barely open. I came home. I'm like, I feel so violated. And then I realized that no, I had left. It was my fault. And no one broke in. It makes you feel very violated because we do see it as an extension of ourselves. It's definitely where we're supposed to feel safe. So to have a dream of someone breaking into your house, that is the equivalent of someone breaking into you. And in this case, breaking into the psyche. And for a grandma to have a dream of a man smashing their way in, running up and begin stabbing her in the back, that's such a brutal, visceral dream. Now, you could say, I'm going along the lines, is that at that point, they were basically either trying to kill her in her sleep or to give her a heart attack. You could say, actually, no, the grandma was waking her up. The grandma was doing that old patent and stabbed multiple times in the back to wake you up. When we were kids, we would just put your fingers in a bowl of hot water. But this TikTok generation, it takes multiple stab wounds to the spine to really get you up. You could well, she might have been trying to shock her to wake up because she was hours away from death. You could argue that, and I'd be willing to listen to that. I'm not saying that it has to be a grandma who's vengeful. You could have a dark entity that was disguised as Grandma Mabel this whole time, or maybe just even this last dream, was trying to claim Phyllis's soul. You know what, I always talk about dark entities. It could have just been a neutral entity. They could have just been nah, she's gotta go. This is her time. She has to leave. It could have been a neutral entity. It could be a dark entity. It could have been her grandma trying. Once she said, I don't want to go, the grandma's like, okay, well, if you don't want to go, that's fine. But you got to get to the hospital soon because you have a big blood clot in your back. But the Grandma Mabel's like, yeah, I could say that. Or what's another way to get my granddaughter to wake up and also realize something's wrong at the same time? And then, bing, changes the dream to the man breaking into the house, stabbing her multiple times in the back. Because that did save her life. That absolutely saved her life. Even though it was a horrific dream, it did get her up. But if it was a good... This is why I think it was something darker than just Grandma Mabel. The fact that she never dreamt of Grandma Mabel again. That is what makes you think that this entity was disguised as her. But also you could say Grandma Mabel thought she was on death's door, and that's why she was showing up in these series of dreams, and now that she's no longer on death's door, she doesn't have to swing by anymore. She can spend time poolside in heaven. Pool made of ectoplasm. No one goes swimming up there. But again, it's an interesting story of what... I mean, really, if you look at this stuff, you have to ask yourself, what are dreams? I've always been of the view that 90%, probably more of our dreams are just neurons firing off, and it's our brains processing information during the day. I believe that some of them may hold deeper meaning, but by no means all of them, not even close to all of them. But there has to, if we look at just these three stories, if you just looked at these three stories, it really does, you have to start to think about what is dream? What are dreams? What is sleep? Where do we go when we fall asleep? I nap a lot. You figure this is a near and dear conversation. But all of these stories are just little bits. Just little tiny pieces. None of them give us a full answer. All of them are bizarre in their own way. And even they don't really connect. Well, two of them. Two of them were due to COVID, but not even they really share a theme outside of, I had a dream. It's something that we all have to do. We all have to sleep. And it's kind of crazy to think that when we're the most physically vulnerable, we also may be at our most spiritually vulnerable. It's a requirement. We have to sleep. But when we dream, are we actually closer to the world of the dead than we would ever tread in real life? When we close our eyes and fall asleep, are we taking a journey? Are we opening ourselves up to visitors from another realm? And even if we knew for a fact that that was the case, even if we knew 100% that when you dream, you are actually vulnerable to paranormal forces and entities to come into your subconscious. Even if you knew that for a fact, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to sleep. You have to fall asleep. You can't stop it. You can choose not to use a Ouija board. You can choose to not hop the fence and walk through an old cemetery at 3 a.m. But all of us, believer and skeptic, all of us require sleep. And while we may maintain dominance over the wakeful world, a world ruled by physics, scientific laws, when we're asleep, all bets are off. And just because you've never had a paranormal dream yet, neither did any of these three people. These were all dreams for the first time where they were confronted with the knowledge that sleeping may open us up to communication with the dead. So even though this has never happened to you before, doesn't mean it won't ever happen to you. Doesn't even mean that it won't happen to you tonight. So sleep well tonight, fellow travelers in the world of the weird. Sleep well. I pray that your dreams are calm and peaceful. But just know at any point, you may find yourself trapped in a nightmare, a world of darkness that you can never escape from. You're like, Jason, that wasn't in any of those stories. There was no world of darkness. Well, the woman did get stabbed to death, okay? That was pretty dark. You're right, that was a little bit of an exaggeration, but you never know. In the world of the paranormal, quit doing that voice, Jason. In the world of the paranormal, things can start off light, but soon turn into a world of darkness, misery, malcontents, hiding from shadow to shadow, dark ridges overlooking deep valleys. There's a dude at the top of the ridge. You're like, what? It wasn't scary. You're walking through the valley of death. You're like, this is so bad. Oh, wait, there's one guy on the hill. You're dreaming. You're walking around. There's like dream stuff behind you, like pogo sticks bouncing around. No, my worst fear. Oh no. I have a fear about things hopping on one foot or whatever pogo sticks made out of. You're running through the valley of dreams. Bunch of ghosts are showing up. Remember me? You were supposed to ask me out for prom. You're like, what? I didn't even know who you are. Ghost disappears and this other ghost shows up. Hey, I was always your biggest fan. Remember all your underwear went missing one day? That was me. You're like, You're running through the valley of dreams. You get to your house and you're like, oh my God, that sure was close. What a terrifying dream. Luckily, I'm in my house. Everything's safe here. I mean, I do have advanced COVID at home while I'm in the world of the wakeful. But, in this world of the dream, I'm sitting in this snazzy house. Your brain's like literally on fire in the dream. You're like, that'll go away. And you sit down and you're like, yes. Just sitting in this dream. Nothing can go wrong now. And then all of a sudden you hear someone breaking in your house. Oh, no. And then the guy's walking through it with a knife. You're like, what? You fell asleep during the last segment. You're like, totally fell asleep during that. You're like, man, with a knife? I don't remember this. You're getting stabbed multiple times. What's the lesson here, Jason? What's the lesson here? Go to the hospital, dude. If you'd not skipped past that last story, you would realize you have a blood clot. You're about to die. Blood's shooting out of your body. You're like, this works. This blood clot comes undone. It's like yarn flying out of your open wounds. You're like, so this is pretty good. Thanks, stab man. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.